Now that we know a little bit about drawings, construction prints, architectural prints, blueprints, let's look at our house, the Cozy Cottage. We're going to use this set of plans to explore how a house is built. So the first drawing we have here is what we call the front elevation. You can see the vertical height of the house. Doesn't give us a lot of other information, but we can start to see some things. This is the ground line. From the ground up, you can see we have some concrete blocks. So we have a foundation wall here that is made out of concrete blocks. The rest of the foundation or basement is underground and is not being shown here. It looks like we got some horizontal siding, probably some vinyl siding. We have some symbols for windows and symbol for a door. We've got some stairs going up to the front of the house, and this would be the whole roof area. If I was to stand over on this side and look at the house, that's going to be the right side. So here is the right side elevation. Again, not a lot of numbers or words, but we can start to see, visualize what the house is going to look like. Again, we have the ground line. What's not being shown is the basement that's under the ground. We can see some concrete blocks. Again, the siding. And this is what we call a gable roof. So a simple triangular looking roof like this is called a gable roof. Probably the most common type of roof, especially in our area. We've got some symbols for windows, and off the back, this would be a deck. So those are some elevations. This is a plan view. We're looking down inside the house right now. We happen to be looking at the first floor. So this is what we call the first floor plan. There's bedroom number 1, bedroom number 2. We've got a bathroom, kitchen. Our dining room table or our kitchen table would go in this area. Over here we have our living room. This is a symbol for a door, so we'd enter the front door. We could immediately go upstairs. It says up. So we know there's going to be something going on upstairs. Or we could walk around this way, open this door up, and then go down into the basement. So just by looking at this drawing, if we didn't see the elevations already, we'd know that there is a basement that we could actually walk down into, and then there's going to be a second floor which we could walk up to. I'm going to go back to the right elevation, and I'm going to point out that the first floor is in this area. The second floor is in this area. So if you can imagine, we have a person standing on the second floor. Now, it's not a full second floor. It doesn't stretch from one side to the other side. As a matter of fact, upstairs, we'd probably have walls like this upstairs. So really the upstairs is only from here to here. So a lot of you have probably seen houses like this. This is like what we call a Cape Cod style. This is the kind of house that I live in. So when you're upstairs, you see these short little walls. They're called knee walls. Right? And so this is really not a 2-story house. This is what we call a 1.5-story house. So we're learning some stuff already. Another thing I want to point out, the overall length of the house is 31 feet 4 inches, and the width of the house is 27 feet 4 inches. We talked about modular construction before, and we said to save money by eliminating materials and using materials the most efficient way possible, and to save time for not having to cut materials, everything should be divisible by 4 inches. And you can see in this case it is. And now what we'll do is we'll switch over here to this is what we call a section view. So this tells us a lot about how the house is constructed. Here, this was the ground line. Now, in the other views, we didn't show what was down below the ground, but here you can see we're showing what is down below the ground. And this is what an area that we would call the basement. So we've got the basement, we got the first floor, and we got the second floor. Now, basements are really common in our part of the country. Sometimes you go to warmer climates and they don't have basements. They either have crawl spaces or they're built right on a slab. So let's talk about basements, and we're going to talk about really the foundation. So here's another picture of a house. We have a wood structure sitting on top of what we call the masonry foundation. So the concrete is down below the ground. So there's a big chunk of the house that we don't see. So we kind of cut it away here so you can see it. So why do we use concrete? Because this is down below the ground. This is where there's potentially water, moisture, insects like termites and things like that. So we want something that's going to be durable and that's going to last and that's not going to rot away. Once we get up off the ground a little ways, what we can do is we can start building with wood. Wood will last forever as long as we keep it dry. So this portion of the house is called the foundation. It's the lowest part of the building, and it's going to support the rest of the building. And a lot of times it's made out of concrete because it's going to last. Let's look at a little bit different view of it. So this is another cutaway. This is not a concrete block foundation, but a poured concrete foundation wall. So we have a foundation wall, and then this is where the wood starts. This first board right here is what we call the sill plate, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And then we have our basement floor or a concrete slab. And then this thing right here is what we call a footing. We'll talk more about the footing. This whole thing put together is what we call a T foundation. Why is it called a T foundation? Well, you got to turn your head upside down here, or twist it. Right? This looks like an upside down T. So what's happening here? This house weighs a lot. There's a lot of weight here. And what happens, we don't want the house to sink down into the ground. So for every thousands and thousands of pounds that the house weighs, the ground has to support those thousands of pounds. So we don't want the house to sink. So we have to do some things to avoid the house sinking, right? We don't want that. I just showed you that. That's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The structure is great. It's a really well built building. The problem was underground. Okay, the problem with the foundation was with the foundation. The size of the foundation, the ground, it won't support all that weight. How do we keep from sinking into the ground? So let's do this. So let's look at Pegleg here. So Pegleg, he's a pirate. He's around on the beach a lot. So what happens here when he walks across the beach? A lot of times his peg is going to sink into the sand, but his foot doesn't. Because what happens, his foot is spreading out his weight. His weight is still the same. This guy looks like he's probably definitely a 300 pounder. Okay, so really what he's got 150 pounds on that foot, and he's got 150 pounds on that leg. But this one doesn't sink into the sand because that 150 pounds is spread out over a wider area than compared to this. All right, so what we do is we put a footing underneath our house to spread out the load. Think about maybe walking in the snow. The other day we had all that snow. We sunk right down in the snow, but there is a way of walking on top of the snow, and that's by putting on snowshoes. And what do snowshoes do? They just spread out your weight. It makes a bigger surface area on top of the snow. So here's our foundation wall, or sometimes called a basement wall, and this is what we call a footing. So this is the footing. This is the footing that is bigger than the foundation wall, and the reason it's bigger, it's called the foot, right? The footing. It spreads out the load, and it's analogous to the feet under our body. Then we have the sill plate, what we're talking about here. There's the sill plate. So this is all masonry, concrete. So a mason would be working with this stuff, and then we get to the first piece of wood and think about how we're going to attach a piece of wood to concrete. It's very difficult to nail because concrete's so hard. So what we do is we make a bolted connection. So these are what we call J bolts, and this sill plate is actually bolted to the concrete foundation. So let's go back and we're going to look in our part of the country. The ground freezes, okay, and it freezes up to 4 feet deep at sometimes. So in our part of the country, like I said, we have basements in our houses because what we need to do is we need to dig down below the frost line. We need to dig down at least 4 feet so that, right, because we know when things freeze, they expand. When it warms up, it contracts. So this ground up here is moving. It expands, it contracts, and expands and contracts. And when things expand and contract, it can possibly move our structure or damage our structure. So here's our footing, right? Better example of our footing here. That footing is spreading out the load, but this footing has to be below the frost line, which is about 4 feet down. So if you're digging a hole 4 feet, you got the tractor there digging a hole, you might as well dig an extra 4 feet and make some actual living space or storage space under your house. So that's why in this part of the country we have lots of basements. So if we go back and look here, this is just a short foundation. This might be something you would see in the South or something like that. But just let's look at it again. We got the footing. We've got our foundation wall. Here, this green board is our sill plate. We talked about the girder, right? And then let's look at the girder. There's a bunch of weight sitting on top of the girder. And so if it was just one board, it's kind of like peg leg again, one column. We need to put another footing underneath here so this column just doesn't sink down into the ground. And over here, in this situation over here, this is where the girder rests on top of the concrete wall. And so we have a detailed view right here looking down on that. So let's go ahead and we're going to go back and we're going to look at our drawings for our cozy cottage. So we have the section view, we've seen the first floor, and now what we're doing is we're looking at the foundation. This is what we call a foundation plan. And so with drawings, it just kind of symbolizes what size and what shape things are supposed to be. I know that these two lines right here represent the concrete wall. Okay? We don't show all the little blocks because that would just be way too many lines. So this is just a symbol for the concrete wall. These two dashed lines right here, I know that this is the symbol for the footing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this. Because the footing, you never see the footing. The footing is underneath the concrete wall, the foundation wall. It's underneath the dirt that's out here, and it's also underneath the concrete slab. So things that are not visible, we show with hidden lines. Okay, so those are dashed lines, those are hidden lines, and these are visible lines. So we've got the foundation wall, we've got the footing, and we have a line running right down through the middle. Well, that was the girder, but we're just showing it here as a single line. It's just a symbol for the girder. And underneath the girder, we've got some footings. And then over here, we can see there's a little pocket or area missing from the foundation wall, and that was that girder pocket that we talked about. All right, so here we go. There's our quick overview, our first look at our cozy cottage plans.